Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. My name's Dulta Doherty, and in this podcast series, I'll be interviewing investors, advisors, entrepreneurs, and recruiters who are based all over the world, and we'll be discussing how to set up, scale, and operate a world-class recruitment company. And sometimes I just like to give some of my own thoughts, and today I thought I would just run through how and why you should set up a podcast as a recruiter. So I'm into podcasts. I've been listening to them for a long time. You know, I have a lot of Joe Rogan and Gary Vee on during the week. I listen to the Second Captain's podcast for my sports stuff. I listen to the Tropical MBA for my independent location independent business stuff. This Week in Startups by Jason Calacanis for any type of business tech stuff that I'm interested in San Francisco. And I listen to the Neil Patel 4-minute podcast on marketing every day. And I'm just really into it. I find that as an independent recruiter who has a remote team, it helps me learn every day because I'm not in an office around people I can learn off. So a lot of my interactions are by phone, by Skype, by email, and then listening and taking in all the information. And I think in many ways our industry is behind so many others, and I try and find the best things out there and then just see if I can implement any of that into the recruitment practice. And that's what we've done with a lot of it. And I've done a few podcasts on that so far. But today's about how you go about setting up a podcast. So the first thing is that go listen to loads of them. Like, figure out whose style do you like? What is it about Joe Rogan that makes his show interesting? Like, is it just that he's funny, or is it that he's able to ask questions in a certain way and he's really into his subject matter? And I think that's his secret. I think he's into it and it comes across, and he's into lots of stuff, and you know, lots of us are, and he gives us a bit of a voice, and we get to just go down the rabbit hole that he's going down. And he would definitely be my biggest influence. So I suppose how you're shaped in terms of what you're listening to will come through in the content that you're producing. But I mean, we can't all just set up and go, okay, I'm going to be Joe Rogan, because you know there's only one Oprah, and he's our Oprah. So we've been doing this for 9 months. We're heading towards 30,000 downloads, all organic traffic, all word of mouth, and a bit of promotion on LinkedIn. I would say, in terms of agency recruitment, it is the most listened to podcast outside of the Recruitment Animal Show, which is more of a radio show than a podcast, going. And I'd love to know if there's any others that are getting more downloads. I haven't found any of them online. They're all very HR and internal recruitment focused. So I suppose that's a long way of saying the podcast is working, and I'm really grateful for everybody that's listened and reaches out to me and asks me questions. And some really interesting people have been in touch this week, and it's people that I would have had to have fought tooth and nail to get a meeting with, and now they're reaching out to me and saying, hey, really enjoying that, well done, keep it up. And that's great. You know, it's a great buzz, especially when you're working by yourself. It's just that bit of affirmation. It's just fantastic. So I suppose the first thing we want to be doing then is researching the type of show that you want to do. I wanted it to be simple. I just jumped onto Young Hisham's podcast and did an episode with him, and he said, check out Anchor, it's really easy. I listened to Gary Vee as well. He said, look, do Anchor as well. Hisham's structure was loose enough, and I wanted to do something that was different than that. I wanted it to be quite tight and quite focused around what we can do to set up, scale, and operate a world-class recruitment business. Because that's the stuff I'm into. I love every bit about it, and I could talk all day and bore my wife to tears about it. So it gives me an avenue to do that. So then I'm thinking, how do I record a podcast consistently and create content without boring people to death? And really that's just finding people in your network to interview. So the first thing I want to make clear is you don't want your podcast as a recruiter to be one big job ad. So try not to sell anything, and just be grateful that the brand equity that it's going to bring you. And later in this, I'll discuss how you can get an ROI from it. So when you're choosing your guests, I would say don't be too fussy at the start. Have a look at your LinkedIn newsfeed, see who likes attention, reach out to them, and invariably they'll come back and say, yeah, sure. Some people might question and say, oh, you don't have a big enough platform for me. But I mean, what odds? I would just whoever's writing funny stuff on LinkedIn or whoever's within your network, get them on, have a chat to them. Now, you're going to be discipline specific in what you do as a recruiter, I hope. So I would I'd make a list of who are the thought leaders in your orbit on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and wherever else people are found in your discipline. Then I would invite them on. I would start trying to develop a relationship with them online, follow them, comment on their stuff, make them aware of you, and then just ask them, and mostly they will be in the business of selling something. So they'll come on and have a chat. I mean, I got Greg Savage on here. He just came on out of the kindness of his heart. And I think I had about 10 listens at the time. And he says, yeah, sure, no problem. I'll come on. And maybe that says more about him than a lot of other people. But what I'm trying to say is people are attainable and they're up for doing these type of things. And I think a personal brand, it's a real topical thing right now. And we're all being encouraged to develop that in the business world. And this is a quick, sure way of doing that. Okay, so you're starting to pick out your guests. I would in my world, I break them into 4 different types. So we have some clients who own recruitment firms, and I can get a direct ROI on that because we're helping promote their brand and their business, and when we're speaking to candidates, we can use that. There's thought leaders like the Greg Savages, and they're good because they've got a good network. There's the independent recruiters, and there's no ROI on that for me, but it's really interesting because I'm one of them, and it kind of helps build camaraderie, and it may lead to other things. And then the 4th for me is recruiters who are abroad and working and living it. And I suppose that's good because it shares the message of how great it is to move abroad as a recruiter, and that's what we do as a rec to rec. So it all helps towards the narrative. And then I think we want to talk about what equipment do you need. So you only need your iPhone to use the Anchor app. And that's all I use right now. However, I have ordered a ton of equipment. You can get cameras. You can use your iPhone for that too. You need a splitter for the sound. You need a good mic. And I would jump on to Neil Patel's YouTube channel and have a look at that. If you just YouTube this stuff, you'll get all the equipment. But before you purchase anything, make sure that you're taking full use of Facebook groups. And just to go back to choosing guests, one of the other things I do is I would have a look at who's on the Recruitment Animal podcast. I'd have a listen. If they're boring, I wouldn't bring them on. But if they're good, like Joe Mullings, I'd reach out straight away and keep at them until they come on. And then I would make sure that you're helping to share that content in those Facebook groups and just kind of become active, become known. And I'm not sure what Facebook groups other recruiters are in for their own industry, but I'm sure there are some, and you're able to influence people by that. But then there's also the Facebook groups for podcasters. So it's really important to join them. And then if you have any questions on editing, on maybe getting a virtual assistant to help you with the edits, maybe it's on equipment, maybe it's on the format, maybe you want some professional advice, or you just want some feedback, then they're the place where you do that. And there's tons of those groups. I wouldn't recommend any in particular, but if something's over like 5,000 in terms of its members, then it's going to be pretty good. Okay, so how do we get an ROI from this? Well, I think I've kind of gone through that, but as part of our recruitment process, if, for example, I have a client in Tokyo, then I'm able to kind of share the episode that we did with one of our guests, Alex Zobelli, who is a manager out there, with potential recruiters who are thinking about Asia, who haven't really thought about Tokyo because it's not the tried and tested route like Hong Kong is. And then, they feel, even before the interview, that they're more informed, that they understand the process, that they know who Alex is, and they're ready to almost commit much more so than if it was just a fresh phone call, speaking to an accented guy on the other side of the world. And we've done that for our clients in New York, in Sydney, in Melbourne, in Hong Kong, and in LA. And it's worked out great. We've loads lined up for Singapore as well. And it just brings everything to life for people. And I suppose part of our process then is promoting that, chopping up that podcast across different channels, keeping an eye on the analytics on what recruiters are liking it and all the rest, starting to engage with them, starting to ask them to think about moving abroad. And then when the time comes, hopefully they choose us as an option to represent them. So that's kind of just some thoughts on why you should set up a podcast. But if anything, it makes your day a bit more interesting. You get to just be a bit more creative, learn different things, speak to people that you would never get a chance to speak to. And then it's not just like a meeting that I forget. It's always there. And I feel like I understand the people that I've done these in-depth interviews with much more so than before. Like yesterday I had Carla Raffold on, who is the founder of Beecham Mattis, and they're owned by Nicole Curtin now. And she discussed her journey from setting it up to selling it to staying on board and to going through the next bit of the growth with them. And she came out with some fantastic anecdotes and was very honest and brutally honest on her own journey. And I feel much more comfortable to represent the best recruiters to her now. And I'd always look out for somebody now, and I would feel like we have more of an understanding because we spent half an hour doing this. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I feel like that type of thing. And then joint branding. So if I'm sharing their stuff on LinkedIn, on Facebook, by association, tend to become a bit more credible in a marketplace where rec to recs who are not professionally trained, who haven't travelled doing this around the world and haven't been doing it for years, and are just able to set up and compete. So we need, as recruiters, to do something that can set us apart. And I think this is a great first step. Next for us is to do some live shows. We've booked a trip to New York City, which I am so buzzing about because we've had 2 kids in 2 years and I haven't had a chance to go anywhere. So that is at the end of February. We'll be meeting up with a ton of clients, cutting a load of content, and then just working out what that format is. And once we get that right, we'll then start bringing the podcast to Dublin. We'll get into London, down to Brighton, might get up north to Manchester. We'll get out to Asia, and we will get out to Australia again because I miss it. But that's all for me today. Happy Friday. Hope you're all having a great start to the new year. And if you want to come on the podcast, hit me up. If you have any questions, hit me up. If you're an independent recruiter and you want to talk about your own business, I will be having a Facebook group set up soon. Once I get around to doing a rebrand and figuring out a few things. But it's all go. It's all great. Thanks for listening.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.